He started using Microsoft Access and Visual Basic with version 1.0, and he built his own consultancy around Microsoft Access and Visual Basic services. And then later joined the Microsoft Access team and worked on Access 2010, 2013 and 2016 with the team. Now working for another company, he's using Git Source Code Control to work on large Access projects. I'm very curious about talking about code quality and source code control with Kevin Bell. Thanks for being here, Kevin. Can you give us a short introduction how you got into contact with Microsoft Access and what you're doing with Access today?
Yeah. I started out in college as an architecture engineering major, and I had a professor that had a software company, which was kind of unusual back in the early 80s, and he forced us to write software as our homework. And so I started out with actually Quick Basic, like 4.5, which is an ancient thing. After graduating, I was living in Melbourne, Australia, working for a company doing some automation stuff, a lot of it in Excel. I then got into Visual Basic 1.0 and pretty quickly realized what I had was databases. And so I was trying to write my own database, and back in Visual Basic 1.0, there was no real database provider. I came home for Christmas, I guess December of '92, and my dad had bought a copy of Access for $99, and he said, "This is kind of cool, you should play with it." And he never got it back. I took it back with me to Australia and started tinkering with it, and for the first several months, I really just fumbled with it. And there was no books, there was no anything. I'm sure I had just horrible table design. But after time, I pretty much figured out what a relational database is, and really kind of went from there. And we've used pretty much every version except for Access 95. We kind of skipped over that one because it was pretty buggy.
Yeah, it was the weakest of them all.
Exactly. And so I've been using it forever. Was a test engineer for 6 years on the Access team, hoping to make a better product. We had varying degrees of success. And then after I left Microsoft, I went to work for another former Access team member at a company, and we use Access as our internal database. Our entire database is on SQL Server. We host a lot of it in the cloud for the website. We have a lot of internal applications, and basically it gives us a competitive advantage because we can quickly iterate. Somebody says, "Hey, I want to have this work a little better," and in minutes or hours we put a change out that in .NET might take days or weeks.
Yeah. Okay, so what are for you the most important factors in code quality to have a maintainable and readable source code, especially VBA code in this context?
I guess for me, I think the biggest thing is consistency. If you're going to write something, you really need to have it readable by somebody else. And that's one of the things. When I was on my own, it was pretty much myself and my father that were doing this, and we could read each other's code. Now working with Tim, we have a little bit different coding styles, and it's really interesting to see his database because he started writing this like 10, 12 years ago when he was a new PM on the Access team. And I've seen iterations of his code where it's like, well, this is really bad, and it's gotten better. Naming conventions have changed over time, so we have this kind of mishmash. But I think that the biggest thing is be consistent with your style and your structure, and that's going to evolve. And as you do new databases, you may introduce, I'm going to change this, or I've heard about some other technique. And then there's things that I just look at that you should have all the time, like error handling, right?
Yeah.
That if I'm looking at somebody's code and I open it up and I see 90% of the stuff doesn't have error handling, or the error handling is all stuff done by wizards, I'm like, you're missing the boat here.
Yeah.
So over time, I think that the biggest thing I would say is have a robust error handling tool. We log everything to a database, so we know who the user was, when the error happened. We use MZ tools to put line numbering in so we can quickly drill down on where the error is. And we have a lot of automation that runs. So we call them robots, and they basically fire and they run on stuff we're processing, and they'll generate thousands and thousands of errors because they're in a bad state, or there's an ODBC problem. A lot of it's garbage, but a lot of times it's a real bug. So we want to be able to go in and say, oh, we hit this 5,000 times, we should fix this.
Yeah. Okay, so you earlier today did a presentation on using source code control to manage your Access projects. Can you give us a short summary what the main benefits of source code control are in an Access project?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the first things that I did when I joined with Tim. I was like, well, there's two of us now. We can't be working on the same database. It's too big. You can't. It's not single user. So we started looking for a source code solution, which we went with that talks with Git. And I think what it does is it's effectively insurance, right? It allows you to check things in, and that's, I guess, the beauty of Git is there's no overhead like the old Visual Studio or Visual Source Code where you had to check it out and it would block from other people. So we check in all of our changes, and it gives us basically an automatic audit trail. So if we see something that's like, oh, something broke, we can end up pretty quickly looking at it and saying, oh, what changed here? We can do a diff. Obviously, code is really easy. Forms are a little harder to work with in Access because it's a kind of an abstract concept of putting out the information. But you can at least see that something's changed, and then you can go, it's just two of us, we can say, hey, what did you change? This broke, or hey, I think you missed something here. And so by having that, it's fabulous, and it really is our lifeblood. So if we lost something, we know we've got a copy in the cloud.
Yeah.
So I think, source code, it really, there's enough options out there now today that anybody doing this professionally really should be using source code, because it might add 5% to your overhead, but all it takes is doing one change 2 weeks ago that you don't remember. Well, you can go back and go, what did I change in that object? Oh, here's the revision history. Oh, that's probably what I changed. Rather than trying to, I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what I changed 2 weeks ago. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is you get your, this kind of automatic trail. And I think from the style standpoint, it's probably a best practice to make little bitty changes, fix one bug, and then commit that. You don't necessarily have to push it to your central repository in Git, but make those changes and put them in small kind of manageable chunks. And if you're using like the online bug stuff, you can actually check it into a bug, so you can tie it into like a bug tracking system or something like that. We don't use that, but we can at least notate, oh, this is what I fixed. And so you might touch the same object for 3 different bugs, and that's fine. You can at least see what you changed for each bug. And if they have to roll back, you can go in and revert, or you can go back to a different point in time.
Yeah. Do you think using source code control has changed the way you work, like the way you write code, like you think about fixing errors, like enhancing the product, and beyond the obvious safety net features?
Yeah, I think it probably makes you, because you're checking it in and somebody else is going to be seeing it, I think you spend a little more time rather than just, oh, here's a quick fix, I'll come back to it later. You don't do that, right? Because there's always something else to work on, something else to fix. So I think it kind of forces you to have a little better code. We also use Thomas Muller's VBA inspector, just so we're on the same consistency. So we've gone in and there's some things we didn't care about, but 90% of the stuff we'll use that to say, oh, let's sweep through this just to make sure we're using the same kind of styles and the same kind of consistency. We cleaned up a lot of the code, but there's some stuff that's just not worth cleaning up. But at least going forward, we're both on the same page from a style standpoint.
Yeah. Beyond the VBA inspector, do you use any source code control related tools to ensure the quality of your code, like gated commits or like forced code reviews or stuff like that?
With the two of us, we really don't. We have an informal code review. We do a lot of .NET stuff too, and depending on who kind of wrote the original software, we might say, hey, can you come look at this, or I'm having a problem with this, let's work on this. But we don't have any real specific, there's no formal code review. I know at Microsoft, you'd push something through and it had to go through code review, just because it's there, and depending on, the seniority of a developer, something like that, they would be on the code review committee or not. But with just the two of us, and a lot of times it's Tim just making changes at 2 in the morning. Yeah. So he's not going to say, oh, I got to push this out there. But yeah, it's something that I think as you expand, you have more and more developers, and you have more and more junior developers, that's probably a great thing to do, just to say, oh, hey, I would make this change here, or I would do this, just so it kind of helps them along, because their code may work fine, but it may not be the best practice, or it may be something that, well, we really can't test this down the road, or you should really break this up in a couple more chunks so it can be more reusable.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I think it's a very different landscape than it was 10 years ago when I was last kind of consulting. A lot of things have changed with the source code control. The visual source aid was quite frankly a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
You paid a heavy tax, and I think with the technologies now, you don't have to pay that tax. So I would strongly suggest if anybody's doing this professionally, give it a try, because it may slow you down 5% or 2% of the time, but all it takes is being able to find one bug in 5 minutes versus 5 hours, and you've recouped that cost.
Yeah.
And if you use a distributed thing like Git in the cloud, you've got an automatic backup. It also makes it easy to collaborate, right? I mean, the world is shrinking, right? I'm at a conference in Vienna talking to people from 10 different countries at least, and we could be collaborating on the same project, and it wouldn't, other than the time zone difference. But I think using some kind of source code, really everybody should be going there. If you think Access is a professional tool, you should have source code control.
Thank you very much for these valuable insights.
Thank you.
Yeah.